You are listening to the Maple Footy Podcast, the unofficial football podcast of the North. I'm your host, Sam Little. Find me on socials at SamLittle44 and the podcast at Maple Footy Pod. And now there's nothing left to say except for sit back, enjoy, and welcome to the show.
Hello. Yes, and welcome back to the Maple Footy Podcast. You already know what we are. We're the unofficial football podcast of the North. And that was a game, wasn't it? I'm sure that you have conflicting feelings about this game and what it could mean for Canada going through the rest of our tournament, however long that may last. And I think that that's valid. I, for one, am feeling extremely conflicted about this game because on one hand, I look and I go, that feels like a huge missed opportunity to put out a statement that we can beat a top 20 team, a top 20 European nation at home, stay at home for the round of 32, potentially then into the round of 16. And I think that that's a huge missed opportunity, which we will kind of get into throughout this episode. But on the other hand, you kind of look and you go, now looking at who we are playing in the round of 32 in South Africa, that feels like a favorable draw. And I don't mean any disrespect to South Africa, because in a World Cup, I truly believe if you take someone lightly, they will make you pay. And South Africa could do just that. So I hope that Canada doesn't take South Africa lightly in the round of 32. But I totally get why a lot of people are like, you know what? Maybe us finishing second wasn't the worst thing in the world. And for that, I see both sides of it. And having now slept on the result and kind of put all my thoughts together for this podcast, I feel very conflicted. And we're kind of going to get into that. And I do want to come at this by saying, I'm kind of looking at this in the lens of a proud yet disappointed father. Like, I'm very proud of what these guys have accomplished in the last 5 years, and especially at this tournament so far, because they've done things that we've literally never seen before in Canada soccer. So for that, I kind of look as a proud father, but then I also look as a disappointed father of, you have raised our expectations now to expect more from this team. And you kind of faltered when we really expected you guys to push on and go forward. So in that sense, I look as a disappointed father. And I do think that being disappointed is weirdly a good thing, because disappointment kind of shows that these guys have done so well for us that, as I kind of just alluded to, we now expect more from these guys. So while, yes, the disappointment sucks and it's terrible that we're leaving Canada and, you know, it sucks that we didn't top the group, and I would love to have beaten Switzerland, there is still good to come from it. And throughout this podcast, we are going to kind of break all that down. So the final score was 2-1 for Switzerland, sadly. And what kind of sucks about this is we're coming off of such that high against Qatar and winning 6-0, grabbing our first ever World Cup win, looking dominant. And yes, people will caveat that with X, Y, and Z of red cards, and it's only Qatar and all this stuff, but you can only beat what is in front of you. And I think our guys did superb against Qatar and showed everybody that we can score goals, we can create chances, we can go out there and win a World Cup game, things that we have not done in the past. So then to come into the Switzerland game, knowing what was at stake, it was very disappointing to see how sluggish we started both halves, and especially in the second half, because it really cost us the game. That 15-minute spell where we just looked like we still felt like it was halftime, that really cost us here, because literally within less than a minute of the first half kicking off, we were down 1-0. And that is never, ever, 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 ever good. You need to start and end your halves strong, like bare minimum. That you have to end your half strong, take that momentum into the next half, and we just did not do that. Switzerland came out of the halftime looking rejuvenated, looking ready, and they were ready. They made us pay within less than a minute, and that is what's going to happen in a World Cup if you lack that concentration. And then, of course, the second goal I think is even more fallible because of how much it could have been prevented. And Not to say that the first goal couldn't have, because it definitely could have, and we will discuss why the first goal could have been. But we'll kind of look at the second goal because it was just such a mess. And it really showed that rustiness that I have been concerned about for Canada kind of was at the forefront here because, of course, as we know and has been well documented, a lot of our guys are coming off of injuries and coming off of not playing with their clubs and all that fun stuff. And I think that was on full display here. They looked rusty, sluggish, lethargic for that second goal. A nothing ball it was a nothing ball that Cornelius makes a mess of that then Luc Defougereau has to get dragged out of position for. He doesn't quite deal with it. And then there's a scuff shot that kind of bounces awkwardly in front of Maxime Crepeau. And I love Maxime Crepeau. As you know, that is my goalkeeper. I will ride or die for that man. He definitely needs to save that shot, in my opinion. So that goal for me was just so preventable. And I think that's the one that really irks me more than the first one, because that first one, it was just once again kind of lazy, in my opinion. We had our defenders really pushing and ball chasing. Derek Cornelius once again gets dragged out of position, which means Alistair Johnston has to push into cover for him. But as Alistair Johnston does that, he leaves his man Vargas open. So who needs to track back? The winger. Who isn't tracking back? The winger. Tajon Buchanan is caught in no man's land. You don't even see him in frame when the ball goes in the back of the net. And for a team that is high on the press, high on tracking back, we need to track back in those situations. And there's nothing that Maxime Crepeau, I think, could have done about that first goal. Vargas, he kicked that like he hated that ball. Like, there was venom behind that ball. So I don't blame Crepeau for that one. I think that you just kind of saw our defense as a little bit scrambled. And once again, I bring into the question of the fitness and the rustiness of this squad in these high intense, high pressure matches. Can that rustiness hold off a little bit? And can these guys play to the level that we know that they can play at? So I think that there were still questions about our back line during those two goals specifically. And outside of that, though, Luc Defougereau, though, since we're talking about the back line, Luc Defougereau, man, he has been our best player this tournament. Like, the only other one that I would probably say is close would be Stefan Eustáquio, but Luc Defougereau is our player of the tournament, hands down, bar none. The fact that he's played less than 30 professional club games in his career at 20 years old and is playing in our back line like he is our most experienced defender alongside an Alistair Johnston who has won countless titles in Scotland, a Richie Larea who has been here, there, and everywhere and has absolutely succeeded every expectation that was ever set for Richie Larea. And then Derek Cornelius, who is another journeyman center back who's done it in Sweden, has done it in the MLS, has done it in France, has done it in Scotland. And you have Luc Defougereau out there at 20 years old, looking as good as he has. If I'm Fulham, I'm integrating him into this squad tomorrow, man, because he's exceptional. The amount of ground that he covered, the amount of times where he bailed us out, the amount of times where he tracked back when it looked like, we might get scored on here. Luc Defougereau, take a bow. And I do want to say, as I criticize Maxime Crepeau on letting that second goal in, if it weren't for Maxime Crepeau, we would have been going to the second half most likely 1-0 down. And this is why Crepeau is my goalkeeper, because whether it was that save against Bosnia on the breakaway and whether it was this save here against Switzerland, both times I was expecting the ball to hit the back of the net. But Maxime Crepeau makes two superb saves in between those two matches there. And while I do think he should have done better on that second goal, you do give him the pass because of how many times he has bailed Canada out in this tournament. Those two big saves. And then, of course, throughout his Canadian career, I think he's looked exceptional. There is now one man that I want to highlight specifically because everything that I'm highlighting trickles down from this man. And that is, of course, our head coach, Jesse Marsch. Whether it be, I think, not ideal squad selection for this match, And also the 26, which we will get into after I'm kind of done breaking down why I don't think this squad selection worked. Then the 26 is a whole other topic of discussion. But looking at the 11, my big concern was Saliba and Chouanier starting in the midfield together, because last time they did not look great together. And that was, of course, the friendly against Iceland back at BMO Field in March, where we drew 2-2. But remember, we drew 2-2 in that match because we brought off Mathieu Chouanier to bring in a Jonathan Osorio. And then we brought in Marcelo Flores and promised David, I think, as well at the same time, to salvage from a 2-0 deficit to bring it back to 2-2. So I was not a huge fan of this midfield pairing, and I understand that cards weren't fully dealt for us in a winning hand per se, with, of course, the Ishmael Kone injury and then Stefan Eustáquio having a knock. But Mathieu Chouanier has not been used at all this tournament before this Switzerland game. He hasn't. He did not get any minutes against Bosnia, and he didn't get any minutes against Qatar. So why are we turning to Mathieu Chouanier with Nathan Saliba in what I would consider a massive game for Canada? And this is nothing against Mathieu Chouanier. I rate Mathieu Chouanier. I just think it's a very strange decision to throw in a pretty well cold Mathieu Chouanier into a massive game with a midfield partner that we have seen in the past has had mixed results. Whereas you have a guy, and I know people will call me biased and will say, you can't put in Jonathan Osorio in this game. And I would raise the question as to why can't you put in Jonathan Osorio in this game to start? He's got the veteran experience. He has been there. He has done that. And yes, where he is a little bit slower than most of his midfield counterparts, Nathan Saliba can cover every single blade of grass on the pitch. Then you have, ideally, Ali Ahmed and Tajon Buchanan, who can absolutely run the wings and everything. So why is Jonathan Osorio not starting this matchup? In my opinion, he should have been the guy with Eustáquio and Kone both sitting out of this game. Why was Jonathan Osorio not starting? And the Stefan Eustáquio of it all also brings up, how injured was Stefan Eustáquio? This is not the first time now where Jesse Marsch has led the media on to believe maybe there's an injury, maybe there's not. Of course, case in point, what is going on with Alphonso Davies, which we will get into. But how injured is Stefan Eustáquio that he can play 35 minutes looking like the Stefan Eustáquio that we have seen in this World Cup? But he couldn't have played 45 for the second half? He couldn't have started this game and maybe make a halftime substitution? Like, far be it for me to, say that this guy can go and this guy can't. I'm not privy to these conversations. Just as someone now that has seen a lot around the Alphonso Davies of everything and the Alfie Jones and Moise Bombito with injuries, potential non-injuries, maybe they can play, maybe they can't. It leads me to go, well, how injured was Stefan Eustáquio? Could he not have played in this game a little bit more than he did? Because when Stefan Eustáquio came in, we looked a different team. He totally brought control back to our game, and we looked like we could go on and win the game. He looked unreal. So you kind of look and you go, why wasn't Mathieu Chouanier being thrown to the wolves, in my opinion, in this scenario, and not an experienced man like Jonathan Osorio, not your vice captain, Stefan Eustáquio? That's kind of where I'm at with our midfield. Then Tajon Buchanan and Ali Ahmed did not have great first halves. And I thought Ali Ahmed didn't have a great outing against Qatar. He looked great against Bosnia, don't get me wrong. But as a manager, I think sometimes you have to make those adjustments. And once again, I'm going to come off as extremely biased. Why was Liam Miller not starting in a game where Switzerland can run? What does Liam Miller do best? He tracks back. He does so much work off the ball. Why is Liam Miller not starting in this game? Especially then, that brings into question the first goal of Switzerland. Is that a different story if Liam Miller is in? We have seen him track back and stop potential goals. So why is Liam Miller not in these scenarios? But then we waited to put him on, which is another point that we will discuss. Substitutions. I understand. Okay, you wanted to try Mathieu Chouanier. You wanted to have Liam Miller off the bench. You wanted to start Buchanan, and Ali Ahmed. But the first half showed we needed substitutions at halftime. And Jesse Marsch himself, in a post-match press conference interview, had even said he had contemplated making changes at halftime. But then he didn't. And then we conceded less than a minute into the second half. Okay, so you missed your opportunity to make the changes at halftime. Fair enough, coaches make mistakes. But coaches need to rectify those mistakes. We went down and you were already contemplating making the substitutions. Why did you not just make them? And I know people will say, well, you can't do that. You can't not make the substitution at halftime, but then 2 minutes later make the substitutions. Why not? Why not? We saw that the substitutions worked. Our team looked far better once our substitutions were made. The problem was the substitutions weren't made after we conceded our first. They're made after we conceded our second. So now we're in a hole. And now you're asking your boys to go in and grab you 2 goals with 30 minutes left to play. Not ideal scenario. Let's be real. So I kind of look and I go, why were they not made? What was the reasoning for those substitutions not to be made? Do you not trust the guys on the bench? Were some of them not ready to go? And I understand the big thing with Jesse Marsch is his loyalty to the guys, but his loyalty to the guys should not come at the cost of our success on the pitch, in my humble opinion. I love that he's loyal to his boys. I love it. And I think loyalty is a great thing to have in this game because it is such a it's almost a foreign concept at this point, loyalty in professional sports in general. So I respect the fact that he's loyal, but loyalty should not come at a cost of the on-field product. And that's where I kind of get into our 26 that were selected. So, as was well reported on, as I have also been following Canada's injury history throughout the build up to 2026. Injuries have been plaguing this squad for the better part of a year now. Whether it be our defenders, whether it be one of our most promising strikers, whether it be some of our midfielders, whether it be some of our wingers, injuries have been not even subplot, they've been the main plot of this film leading up to our World Cup. So it was always going to be hard to select 26 guys. But I think that maybe we should not have brought so many injured guys. And this is not a reactionary take either. This is something that I have been saying for months. So this isn't just me going, oh, well, we lost, so maybe he made the wrong choices. No, this is something I have been saying for months now. My concern is, how fit will these guys be? How rusty will they be? How good will they be? And can they even go? And I think we're getting a lot of those questions answered. And for the most part, they have not been positive answers. So we'll start with the Alphonso Davies of it all. Alphonso Davies should be at this World Cup. And I'm going to contradict myself because for a lot of our other injured players, that criteria is going to switch. But with Alphonso Davies, he is your best player, and I'm not hearing anything else. Alphonso Davies is our best player. He's our most important player. He is the captain of our country, and he has done so much for Canadian football since he debuted when he was 15 years old, that for him, you give him the pass. If you were told before this tournament, he probably won't be able to feature in any of the 3 group stage matches. He may not even be able to feature in the round of 32. He'll be lucky to feature in the round of 16 if we get there. You bring Alphonso Davies. You do. I'm sorry, and I know, once again, that's going to contradict pretty much everything I'm about to say about other players, but Alphonso Davies for me is different. You hold him on that different pedestal. He needs to be there. He has to be there because the chance of playing Alphonso Davies is just too important to leave him at home because he can't play. If there is a 1% chance that Alphonso Davies can play, you bring Alphonso Davies. My issue lies with the Alphonso Davies of it all in the blatant lying to not only media, but to fans that Alphonso Davies, he's good to go against Qatar. It's likely we'll see him. We don't see him. we decide, okay, it's probably because we were up 6-0. Do you need to introduce Alphonso Davies? Probably not. Okay, we knew from the get-go he wasn't going to play against Bosnia. Okay, but then we were told he's going to feature against Switzerland. We were in need of a goal against Switzerland. And correct me if I'm wrong, but Alphonso Davies has stepped up for this country on numerous occasions to provide big goals, big assists, big moments, not even just this country, but with Bayern Munich as well. But since we're talking about Canada, for this country, and he doesn't come on. And then it comes out after the game that Alphonso Davies and his health were, quote, a decoy. And that to me feels like a big slap in the face to a lot of the fans that were hopeful that Alphonso Davies was going to be playing. And it just feels like a blatant lie to the fans that have followed you for these 2 weeks minimum of the World Cup. And if he can't go, I have no issue with that. But just say, he ain't ready, guys. Sorry. He's not dressing. Or he is dressing, but you're not going to see him. I don't have an issue with that because at least you're being transparent, because I don't subscribe to the whole belief of a decoy. This is professional sports. Switzerland were going to be prepared for Alphonso Davies, not prepared to not play against Alphonso Davies, prepared to play against Alphonso Davies, and prepared to play against him, whether it be 15, 20, 35, 45, 90 minutes. They would have been prepared for all of that. So I don't really subscribe to the whole decoy belief. If he's injured, that is okay. But then just say he's injured. He's probably not going to play. I don't like the blatant lying to the fans. I think that that's a really strange route to take, especially after these fans. Not that fans are technically owed anything, but our fans have shown up in droves, whether it be Toronto, which I was there. The fans were amazing. And Vancouver, where I've been jealously sitting at home watching on my phone going, man, that would be amazing to be there. The fans have shown up. I think the least we can do for the fans is say a certain player is not going to feature. And that is my issue with the Alphonso Davies of it all. I love Alphonso Davies. I'm not sure how much say everybody has in this matter. I just don't like the whole, we used him as a decoy. That to me just reeks of why? Like, why? And I know I'm not a professional coach, so I'm sure that there are reasons to all this stuff. But me personally, just as a fan and as someone that loves this team and loves Alphonso Davies, I just find it a very strange approach to take of we used him as a decoy. But we'll move into some of our other injured players as well. So now diving a little bit deeper into our squad selection. And once again, I'm going to preface this by saying this is not a reactionary take. I have been saying this for months. So looking at our defense, I think, has not looked as good as they have in the past. And you can probably definitely attribute that to no Moise Bombito in our defense, who is our best defender, no Alphonso Davies, who is our best player, and the fact that the rest of our defense have come off of injury-riddled seasons. So you can attribute it to that a little bit. What I think is very frustrating is we basically only have two center backs of this tournament, Derek Cornelius and Luc de Fougerolles. And Derek Cornelius, for me, has had an underwhelming tournament, whether it be against Bosnia, Qatar, or Switzerland. I think he's had an underwhelming tournament. And that's okay. It happens. And as I said, I rate Derek Cornelius. But we don't have anybody that can replace Derek Cornelius. And yes, I know what you're thinking. Well, wait, no, we have Joel Waterman, Elfie Jones, and Moise Bombito. But do we? Because Joel Waterman's been a non-factor all tournament. Like, I like Joel Waterman. I know that that's a controversial take. I like Joel Waterman. I think he's a good center back and he's a good player. He has not seen the pitch in the two friendlies before the World Cup and has not sniffed a minute at the World Cup. So is he really an option? Then you have Moise Bombito, who has played a grand total of 75 minutes in 200 days. Half an hour of that was a friendly against Uzbekistan where he came out and looked like he was not going to the World Cup. And then 45 minutes of that was a not intense at all matchup against Qatar where we were already up 3-0. And then we brought in Moise Bombito. And let me say, I love Moise Bombito. He is our best center back. I think he is an elite level center back. I genuinely believe that. But can he go? Because indication for me shows he cannot go in a high intense matchup as a World Cup would signify. He didn't get on against Bosnia, and he did not get on against Switzerland when our center backs could have used a little bit of a shakeup in both those games. So yes, it was amazing to see a guy that has worked his tail off to get to the World Cup and play that 45 minutes against Qatar. And you know me, I love a feel-good story. But as a coach, sometimes your loyalty should not come before what's best for your team. Moise Bombito asked Jesse Marsch for a second chance. And my goodness, I empathize with Moise Bombito. I too, if I was good enough to be in that position, would have also asked Jesse Marsch for a second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth chance. I get, like, yes, that makes total sense. But Jesse Marsch then, I think, should have seriously considered bringing in another center back, whether it was a Ralph Priso, Kamal Miller, a Jamie Knight-Labelle, whoever. I think it seriously should have been considered and most likely gone through, because Moise Bombito has not played a factor in our tournament so far, really. And with a struggling Derek Cornelius at the moment, that is not a great sign. And with a Joel Waterman that seems like he's not going to pick up any minutes, okay. And then you move into the Alfie Jones of it all. Alfie Jones was an unused sub against Bosnia and not dressed for Qatar and Bosnia. Not Bosnia. Switzerland. He was not dressed for our two matches at the end of the group stage. He didn't dress. He's injured. He's coming off an injury. He's been injured since January, and he hasn't played at club level since January. He did not play professional football in the calendar year of 2026 until our friendly against Uzbekistan, where he got the final 20 minutes, and then we have not seen him since. Why is Alfie Jones on the team? And once again, this is nothing against Alfie Jones, the guy, the player, just as someone who's looking at it of, we have other center backs. Why are we bringing an injured Alfie Jones who can't go? He cannot go. So why is he here? You have guys like Ralph Priso, Kamal Miller, Jamie Knight-Labelle that could have stepped in to this role, especially when Moise Bombito was potentially pulling out the squad, or when Marcelo Flores had to sadly pull out the squad, because I love Jaden Nelson. I am hyped that Jaden Nelson is there. Jaden Nelson has not played a minute yet. So why is Jaden Nelson here when you could have then used that Marcelo Flores incident, as sad as it is that he's missing out this World Cup, and I do think that we have actually missed him greatly, but why did you not use that to then bring in a defender here to then maybe help us get something against Switzerland? Maybe Derek Cornelius isn't having his best game. Luke DeFougerolles is on a yellow card. If he gets another yellow, he's out the next match. If Alistair Johnston gets a yellow, he's out the next match. Why did we not think of these things to bring in these defenders when we need defenders? Because our defenders have been our most injury hit part of the team. I don't understand it. And you saw it against Switzerland here. We didn't have anybody to replace our defenders, so we stuck it out with our defense. And fair enough, once again, I rate the loyalty, but loyalty should not come at a cost for your team. So moving away from the 26 that we selected and the 11 that we select on the day, and I will reiterate, yes, I would have started Liam Miller and Jonathan Osorio, and I would have made changes earlier, like, say, bring in a Promise David, bring in a Stefan Estacio a little bit earlier than we had on the day. But once again, I'm not privy to those conversations of how healthy these guys are, how long they can go, and far be it for me to be an armchair quarterback, or I guess coach in this scenario. But we're going to move now into something that's become synonymous with Canada soccer when we kind of fall short when expectations are highest, and that is the lessons learned of it all. Because anytime it feels like Canada falls short, we bring out the line, lessons were learned. And that's okay, because I believe that lessons are learned in a loss and in a victory. I think you can learn a ton. Case in point, lessons were learned when we qualified for 2022 World Cup, and then lessons were learned at that World Cup. We learned that, you know what? The World Cup is a different beast altogether, but my goodness, look at what our guys did. Even though we lost all 3 games, look at how good our guys did, especially against Belgium and that first half against Croatia. We looked good. And then, of course, Copa America. Great lessons were learned there. We learned, holy cow, we can hang with some of the best in one of the hardest competitions in the world. That's a good lesson to learn. But then I always fall back to Nations League Gold Cup 2023, where we had lessons learned there. The friendly against the Netherlands before the first game that Jesse Marsch took over. The Nations League Gold Cup in 2025, lessons were learned. Then the friendlies leading up to the World Cup like Australia, Montreal, Iceland, Tunisia, in Toronto. And then, of course, right before this tournament with Republic of Ireland, we bring out the line, lessons are learned. And I'm a believer that lessons can be learned from a loss, but also you have to show that these lessons are getting learned, because we still struggle against a low block like we did against Australia, like we did against the Republic of Ireland. We learned that maybe sometimes we need to rise to the occasion when the expectations are highest, like we should have in the Nations League 2023 final and the 2025 semifinal and the Gold Cup 2025, but we didn't. Okay, lessons are learned, yes, but then you have to show that lessons are learned. We struggled to break down Switzerland, who were looking pretty good defensively on the day. We struggled to break them down. I thought these were lessons learned. When we are supposed to succeed and exceed expectations like we were supposed to back in 2023, like we were supposed to back in 2025. Whereas the lesson learned then, we were in the driver's seat against Switzerland. And I think that's what really hurts most of all, is that we were in the driver's seat against Switzerland, because our destiny was in our hands to continue playing in Vancouver, to show the world that we can beat a top 20 team, a perennial World Cup qualifier, a perennial round of 16er in the World Cup. Switzerland is what they do. They get out the group. What better statement to make than to beat them? Go out there and beat them. And the chances were there. We were not played off the park in this game. It was just simple mistakes that we've made in the past that came back to haunt us yet again. So I think that there was this amalgamation of potential rustiness, squad selection, substitutions, those lessons that we have not learned from, in my opinion. We need to now, when we go to LA to face South Africa, I think our boys need to display that we can go out there and when the expectations are going to be highest, because this game against South Africa, for me, is the indicator of if this is a successful or a failure of a World Cup. If we progress past this knockout stage against South Africa, I think this is a successful tournament, no question about it. If we go out first knockout stage against South Africa, I think that we have failed. I think. Yes, that does not erase the great point against Bosnia and our first ever World Cup win. It does not erase it. But I think that as a nation and as someone, as a fandom now that calls ourselves a footballing nation that is behind these boys more than ever in the past, we need to expect and want for more than to just get out of the group. Whereas, yes, for Canada Soccer, that is an accomplishment. That is 100% an accomplishment. But I also think it's also true to say that was the bare minimum coming into this tournament. They needed to make it out of this group, and I think that they need to beat South Africa in our first knockout stage game, because that, I think, will turn heads of doubters, and that, I think, will show, okay, when the pressure is on, you guys can perform, because you did against Qatar. Qatar was always a circled game, highlighted, however you want to say it. Qatar was always a massive game for us. It was going to be, well, if we beat Qatar, we can probably get out this group. If we can't beat Qatar, we probably ain't getting out of this group. And they did. They beat Qatar, and we did end up getting out of this group. But the disappointment comes when we could have also, I think, beaten this Switzerland side. And now we go to LA and we will face South Africa in what I think will be the biggest game ever for the Canadian men's national team. So as I'm now kind of been a little bit more negative, but also I think truthful in my assessment of the Switzerland match and just our tournament as a whole, I would more so say. I do want to point out some big history-making moments for this national team in this group stage because I would like to kind of put out some of the positives too. We've reached the first knockout stage that we ever have in a men's World Cup, grabbed our first ever point against Bosnia, and a first ever World Cup goal on home soil. Then followed by our first ever World Cup win, where we kept our first ever World Cup clean sheet, got multiple World Cup goals in a match, the biggest ever win by a CONCACAF nation at the World Cup, first host nation since England to see one of their players grab a hat trick, among many other history-making moments. And now, of course, for the first time in our history, we are progressing to the knockout stage. So definitely a lot of pauses to make. And now, as I have said, we are going to play South Africa, which I think a lot of people, myself included, feel is a very favorable draw. But in a World Cup, you cannot think like that. Every single game needs to be played like it is the final, because if you let your guard down for a second, you will get punished. Whether it is against a Switzerland, that's going to be a lesson for the boys to learn. You got to keep your concentration because Switzerland made you pay. And then it's not just the top nations that will make you pay. Look at Curacao against Germany. A team that everybody wrote off, didn't think that they could even score a goal. At 1-0 down, Curacao goes and gets a goal against Germany to level the game at 1-1, and then would continue to be level at 1-1 for 16 minutes. Yes, the result would then go the way of Germany in quite dominant fashion, but in World Cup knockout stage games, if you let your guard down for 5 minutes, South Africa or Germany or Argentina or Curacao and anybody in between could punish you. So we're going to need to keep the concentration up. And I think that we also do need to take our hats off, though, to the Voyagers and the Canadian fans that went out in droves to support this team, because now, of course, our home World Cup has come to an end because we will now not be playing another game in Canada, which I also think is a crying shame. As a host nation, it's kind of crazy that we only got 3 games in Canada. And I understand people will say, well, yes, then win the group and you could have stayed in Vancouver. And while, yes, that is true, we couldn't have set up a scenario in which we finish second and the boys go back to Toronto for the round of 32 and maybe a round of 16 game if they so get there, like have the round of 16 game on that side of the bracket in Toronto so that the boys could stay in Toronto. I know KJ, Chris and Jack of One Soccer was saying this yesterday, and I totally agree. I think that it's kind of ludicrous, and I understand, as KJ was alluding to, that there was financial gain of having the States host all these games. Yes, I 100% get that, but when you're a host nation, you lose your host nation advantage after 3 games, even though you made it out of the group, to me is kind of baffling. But regardless, we won't harp on that any longer. Now we will kind of look as to how I would line up against South Africa. In goal, you're not changing them. It's going to be Maxime Crepeau. Left back is going to be Richie Larea. You don't have anybody to put in for Richie Larea. And I think defensively, Richie Larea has looked quite good this tournament. Going forward is where I think that he's kind of struggled a little bit. But regardless, Alphonso Davies, he's not, even if he is healthy to play, he won't be able to play a full 90, potentially to 120. Hopefully we don't go to extra time. But regardless, on the right, I would put in Alistair Johnston again, whereas once again, I don't think he looked splendid against Switzerland. There is still Alistair Johnston. He's Alistair Johnston. We also don't really have another player to put in there. I know you would say Nico Seeger, but once again, he's been almost a non-factor all tournament. So to now put him in this massive game feels a little bit unfair to Nico Seeger to then go, all right, buddy, go out there, champ. I would probably introduce Nico Seeger throughout the game if the game calls for it, but that is a conversation for when the game is actually going on. Then, of course, at center back, you're just not dislodging him at this point. It's Luke Defougerel. He's unreal. Yes. I would be tempted to take out Derek Cornelius because I honestly don't think he's been at that Derek Cornelius level that we have seen for him for Canada in this tournament. The only problem is you don't have anybody to put in for him outside of a cold Joel Waterman. And are you going to do that to Joel Waterman? I would venture a guess to say, no, you won't do that to Joel Waterman. So I would say Derek Cornelius retains his spot solely because you don't have anybody else to put in, unless by some miracle, Moise Bombito can in fact go for 90 minutes at a high intense level. But I don't think that is on the table. My two wingers, I would play Jacob Schaffelberg on the left and Liam Miller on the right. I would take out both Tajon Buchanan and Ali Ahmed. I don't think Tajon Buchanan has enjoyed his best tournament either. He looked great against Qatar, but outside of that has been pretty much a non-factor for Canada in many of our two other matches, and I think actually actively kind of cost us against Switzerland. Whereas Ali Ahmed, I think, looked electric off the bench against Bosnia. So I think maybe if you can bring him in against South Africa, maybe you can kind of have that similar result. Whereas Lee Miller, he's going to run, he's going to create chances. And Jacob Schaffelberg, kind of same thing. He's going to run, he's going to create chances. They both go forward and come back. That's what you're going to need. In the center of the park, it's Nathan Saliba. I thought he had a great game against Switzerland, especially next to Stefan Estacio. So if Stefan Estacio can start, I would put in Stefan Estacio. If he can't, I would go Jonathan Osorio. I don't think that would happen, but I would go Jonathan Osorio. My two strikers would be Jonathan David, who I think post-Bosnia has had himself a very good tournament. He, of course, grabbed that hat trick against Qatar. And then against Switzerland, even though he didn't really have a whole ton attacking going on, the work rate that he put out there, and there was times where he was back in our box putting in last-ditch slide tackles to prevent goals. So yeah, Jonathan David starts this game for me. Next to him is Promise David. Kyle Larin, I love Kyle Larin. I think he's stepped up for Canada in this tournament, but I'm concerned with Kyle Larin because throughout that game against Switzerland, he kept on reaching for his back, which leads me to believe that maybe he's not fully healthy, and he looked very slow on the day, which I would also attribute to potentially his back or whatever could be going on there. And also Promise David, I think he's done nothing for the last 2 years except for score goals. We are going to need goals in this round of 32, and he scored an absolute beauty, and that was a great goal. I didn't even touch on the goal against Switzerland, but what a goal that was. The ball from Luc de Fougerolles to Nathan Saliba with just unreal control to pull it out the sky and then find Promise David on the turn. And then Promise David, regardless that, it's kind of an empty net. That is not an easy finish at all. He's at full stretch just trying to get to that ball, and it goes in. It's a great goal. So those would be my two starters. It would be David and David. That would be my starting 11 for South Africa. And once again, as I was critical about this team, I was critical in the sense of I'm disappointed because I feel like we could have done and have accomplished just that little bit extra. So it's not me coming out of, I hate this team, I hate this. No, I love this team. I'm proud of what this team has done. But also, on the same hand, I am a little bit disappointed because I feel like the table was set for us to do something really spectacular. And sadly, we didn't do it here. And maybe that just means we're reserving it for this round of 32, and may we dream, and it might happen the round of 16, and who knows, you know what I mean, if we get to that far of the competition, beat South Africa first. But yeah, I just don't want to come off as super negative, and as I don't want it to also come off as, I'm doing all this rage stuff to get clips. That's not what it's about for me. It never has been. It never will be. I just want to have an honest conversation about the Canadian men's national team and about our performance against Switzerland and throughout this tournament as a whole so far, where our highs were, where our lows were, what I maybe would have done differently, what I think needs to be improved on, what I think should stay the same. So I just want it to be that kind of conversation, not the I'm going to yell and scream at my camera and microphone and it's going to get 1,000,000,000,000,000 trillion hits and everybody's going to know me as the angry Canadian guy. No, that's not what it's about. I just want this team to do well, and I think that so far we have done well, albeit we could have done just that little bit better. But outside of that, I will say thank you so much for listening. This was a bit of a longer one and a bit of a different one too, so I do hope that you enjoyed it. And just thank you so much. I hope that you follow along, and until next time, cheers everyone.
And that was your Maple Footy podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Check my socials for any and all future updates. Remember to support Canadian football, be kind, and until next time, live, laugh, Little.